Hey guys, it's Yuta. So this is a response video to 5 reasons why I hated living in Japan by Azusa, my fellow multilingual Japanese person who has experience living abroad. She currently lives in Montreal, Canada. Her video is supposed to be about her personal experience living in Japan, but she makes pretty bold statements saying Japan is like this and that. So in this video, I'm gonna highlight some of her statements and offer my views. And I know you like watching Japanese people argue with each other, so grab your popcorn and watch.
So like we're not really capable to accept something that's not familiar, something that's not major, something that's not main road, or something new pretty much. So right now living in Canada, I see many people here think that Japan is really creative and like advanced and like innovative country and place and people, but the reality is it's not like that at all.
So she made a pretty strong claim that Japanese people are not capable of accepting unfamiliar, non-mainstream, or new ideas. There's certainly some truth to this. I'm pretty sure that many people who work in Japan have to go through the predicament of having to use an excessive amount of Excel sheets when there's apps who can do the same thing much better. And of course, there's a reason why people always make a joke about how Japanese people still use fax machines. On a more serious note, the healthcare industry in Japan seems slow to accept new drugs and treatments, and cancer treatments are a good example. However, there's other areas where Japan is totally open to new things. For example, cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Well, Japan used to host the world's biggest Bitcoin exchange, Mt. Gox, and after its bankruptcy, Japan was pretty quick to react and made regulations. And today, Japan has many cryptocurrency exchanges that are relatively well regulated. And some major retail stores accept Bitcoin. And cryptocurrency is some of the newest things in the 21st century. And also, obviously, robots. I remember Pepper being very popular in Japan. It was originally French, but SoftBank bought the company and it became very popular in Japan. Some Japanese shops were happy to try out Pepper to handle customers. And even some Japanese train stations had a Pepper. And how about Henna Hotel, which is a hotel where robots meet the customers? You probably remember a lot of YouTubers went there. So there are plenty of examples where Japan creates and accepts new ideas. And also, Japan can be very open to something that is not mainstream. And anime is actually a good example. Evangelion started as a non-mainstream anime. It was pretty different from the average anime that people were familiar with. But eventually it became very popular and now it's mainstream. And Densha Otoko, or Train Man, was just some random story from an anonymous messaging board online. But then again, it became very popular. So non-mainstream culture becoming mainstream happens all the time. Actually, not just in Japan, but in Japan too. And yes, it's easy to find areas where Japan is slow to accept new ideas. But it's just as easy to find areas where it's not. You could probably say Japan tends to be slow when it comes to social changes. But Japan can be extremely creative when it comes to producing new goods and services.
Our culture is not really to respect and accept the individuals. To me, it's really hard. I'm Japanese and I have green hair, I have a lot of piercings, I have a lot of tattoos, and then like people, especially elder people, will not treat me in a serious way. Or maybe there are some, but generally they don't.
Again, she's not 100% wrong, but flat out saying, oh, Japan doesn't accept individuality is a bit of an overstatement, especially when the basis of her statement is that people around her didn't like her fashion style. It is certainly true that many places in Japan have a strict dress code. Many schools have ridiculously meticulous dress code. There was an extreme case where the school told a girl to dye her hair black because her hair wasn't naturally black. That's outrageous. Many workplaces have a strict dress code too. especially with customer-facing jobs. I've had a part-time job at an electronics shop, and the dress code was strict. I had to keep my hair short, above my ears, I had to shave every time, that kind of stuff. But there are many schools that don't have a strict dress code. My high school was a good example. Dyeing your hair, short skirts, earrings, not a problem. There's also a few schools that don't have a dress code or uniforms at all. And of course you can choose your school, as long as it's close enough and you pass the entrance exam. And jobs are the same. Many fast food restaurants and convenience stores don't have a strict dress code. And when I had a full-time job in Japan, there was no dress code. Now come to think about it, I've met a Japanese woman with green hair and she had a full-time job in Japan. So it's possible. Not saying it's commonplace, but it's possible. And let's not forget that Japan is the kind of country where you can explore types of fashion that might be hard to pull off in some other countries. So Japan might not be as collectivist as you may think. I do think Japan is more collectivist than individualist, but the question is the degree. I've just had a hypothesis that school uniforms can be a good indicator of collectivism. So I checked the wiki page, which is a totally reliable source, sarcasm, and I found out in Colombia, all schools are required to have uniforms. In Japan, it's not every school. And coincidentally, according to Hofstede Insights, Colombia is more hierarchical and less individualistic than Japan. I think we need more research on this topic.
So reason 2 is hierarchy. We have a strong and severe hierarchy system in the society. From school to working place, we do have that. So it's really normal in Japan that you can't really fight back or even try to discuss in a fair ways with their bosses or with their teachers. It's almost impossible. But for example, at school, if you break some rules, you can't roll up your skirt to make it shorter or anything, and you break it, and then teacher will scold you in however they like to. They can get you in a teacher's room for 2 or 3 hours and keep on scolding at you and asking you why you did it. And that's what happened to me. Well, I hated it, definitely. But why? Because I wanted it, you know?
Now if you ask me, I'm not particularly fond of the hierarchy in Japan. But then again, she's a little too intense with her wording. It is not almost impossible to express your opinions with teachers and bosses in Japan. I understand that that's how she felt in Japan and her experience is valid. Although I do question if her example is really adequate because she knowingly broke the rules repeatedly and said, "Oh, it's because I wanted to." I mean, it's totally strange that teachers were so unhappy, right? Having said that, yes, I do have some experiences where I thought that teachers were unreasonably harsh to students. And there are also rules that make no sense. But fortunately with me, that kind of experience only happened in junior high school. My elementary schools were okay, and my high school was okay too. And this is coming from a person who doesn't like schools in general. I can make an hour-long video just criticizing Japanese schools. But I want to be fair. My teachers were alright for the most part. I'm not sure if you have noticed, but I'm very vocal and assertive for a Japanese person. And throughout my entire education in Japan, I've always openly asked questions, talked back, and questioned teachers. And guess what? None of them told me to shut up and obey. I remember that one time in high school, I didn't agree with the answer that the teacher gave to us. So after class, I walked up to the teacher and said, "I don't agree with your answer. I think my answer is the correct one for the following reasons." The teacher of course disagreed, but we had an adult, civilized conversation. Of course, not all teachers were reasonable, but the majority were. And it's the same with work. I've had several part-time and full-time jobs in Japan, but I never felt like it was impossible to express my opinions. Of course, there are abusive or very authoritarian kind of teachers and bosses, but it's a bit of a stretch to say that most of them are like that in Japan.
In my opinion, Japan is not artistically or creatively inspiring or encouraging atmosphere whatsoever. And living in Montreal right now, I really feel like here is creatively and artistically really encouraging and inspiring atmosphere in the city. And I felt the same way in like London or Barcelona.
Well, I do understand that she personally didn't find Japan artistically inspiring, but I disagree with her conclusion that Japan doesn't have an artistic atmosphere. I'll explain. My experience of growing up in Japan was very artistic. In elementary school, we had art-related classes every week. It could be visual art, crafts, music, or calligraphy. I really liked those classes because they are fun. And some of my classmates would draw some comic strips and show them to us. It was a very cool thing to be able to draw manga for us. As of 2018, art-related classes account for 10 to 16% of the total study hours in Japanese elementary school. So virtually all children are exposed to art since a young age. And what about anime? Not every anime is considered artistic by many people, but some anime definitely have many elements that are considered artistic, such as subject matters, the visuals, perspectives, or techniques. It's basically like films. And my university had lots of artistic classes that were open to everybody regardless of their major. I took a contemporary dance class taught by a professional dancer. That was so much fun, and I met many people who had artistic interest who introduced me to different types of art. Another favorite class of mine was about tanka, Japanese style poetry, and I also liked theater plays. In my university there were many theater groups and the tickets were affordable, so I would sometimes watch them. I'd also watch more professional ones, and many of those plays were accessible and affordable. And I'd also watch theater plays on TV for free. I should probably stop here because I can go on and on. But apart from my personal experiences, art is everywhere in Japan. How about traditional architecture and statues? Temples and shrines are everywhere in Japan. These photos are from Fukuoka, where Azusa is from. And this is in the middle of a busy city. When I went to Fukuoka, I saw creative street musicians every single day. And there was also a famous festival, and there were many free concerts outside. And here I'm talking about art in general, not necessarily something from Europe. But even with something that's a little more highbrow, like going to museums, many Japanese people like it. In 2017, 5 of the most visited museum exhibitions daily in the world took place in Japan. 5 out of 20 is a lot. And in Tokyo, you can see something like the famous Monster Cafe. I think this is very artistic. And if you want high art, go to Shibuya. You will see this gigantic painting by a Japanese artist, Taro Okamoto. I think this is awesome. So the truth is, if you open up your eyes, you'll find out art actually is all around. And I find it very inspiring. So I don't necessarily disagree with everything that Azusa says.
For example, public transportation in Japan works really well, but behind something that working perfectly or perfectly organized, there's always like some sacrifices and stress of people like us.
I agree. Many things in Japan are very well organized, but they're also built on many people's hard work and often a lot of overwork. It's a trade-off, right? In some countries, you don't get the same level of service, but if you work there, it can be more relaxing. So it comes down to your preference. She prefers a more laid-back environment, I guess, and I'm with her. But if you prefer the Japanese style, that's okay too. We just have different preferences. But I have to admit, Japan can go overboard sometimes. Azusa presents her views as minority views. But the truth is, many of her statements completely conform to Japan's cultural narratives. For example, that Japan doesn't respect individuality. Many people were saying this in the 90s, on TV, books, magazines, This narrative was everywhere. I myself grew up thinking that. When I was a teenager, I was thinking that studying and working in Japan would be a horrible experience because of things like that. But when I actually grew up and met more Japanese people, I realized it wasn't really like that. There was a lot of room for expressing your opinions, choosing your path, and making changes around you. And you've probably met many Japanese people who have similar views to her. But think about it. Japanese people who prefer living abroad, speaking foreign languages, or hanging out with international people, they often just prefer other cultures to Japanese cultures, so it's completely logical for them to not like many things about Japan, because it's not their preference. Japan obviously has many problems, but it's not because it's not like Canada or Western Europe. Japan has many internal problems, and I'll discuss them more in the future. Stay tuned. Having said that, I can totally relate to what Azusa is trying to say, because I'm a very individualistic person who didn't like Japanese schools. I like many other cultures, I like Western ideologies, and I very much enjoy living in different countries. And I can totally relate to her sentiments that living in Japan as a Japanese person isn't always easy. But she's a little too strong with her generalizations, doesn't offer sufficient examples or consider different cases. So I hope my video gave you more context. Neither her experiences nor mine represent other people's experiences because it depends on the kind of person you are, where you go to school and work, your friends, your family, etc. So the only way to find out if you will enjoy living in Japan is actually living in Japan, because you're not her and you're not me. But if you are interested in living in Japan, I think you need to be able to speak Japanese, and if you want to learn Japanese with me, I can send you some free Japanese lessons by email, so click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao ciao!